Jax's revenge domain. The moment I knew everything was about to collapse, I was flat on my back under rack 14, tightening a mount that had started humming under high load. The hum meant stress, stress meant heat, and heat meant trouble. My whole body was covered in fiberglass dust, one knee bruised from the concrete floor when I heard their footsteps. Heavy shuffle from Helen, followed by the cocky rhythm of her son's designer sneakers. Ryan's voice cut through the server room like nails on a chalkboard. "So this is the dungeon," he said, laughing. "Kinda dark and medieval down here. You ever think about just moving all this to the cloud?" Cloud. He said it like it was some miracle cure for everything. I didn't answer, just finished my torque check and slid out, standing up slowly. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and when our eyes met for half a second, he looked away first. "I'm Lucas Rodriguez, 48 years old, and I've been running infrastructure at Southridge Data Systems for 16 years. Built this place from a glorified server closet into a zero-downtime fortress. Every cable, every configuration, every failover system. I designed it, installed it, maintained it, and this kid just asked me why we don't move it all to the cloud." The farm was humming perfect that day. Stable, cool, efficient. We'd just passed our quarterly power integrity audit with 99.87% uptime. Every router was clean, every backup tested. 16 years of my life poured into these concrete floors. Not just professionally, I bled into this place. Late nights when the generator died and I jury-rigged it back up with parts from my own truck. Weekends when nobody answered the emergency line except me. Helen used to understand that. Back in the early days, she'd sit with me at my workbench with her terrible coffee, asking about throughput and server redundancy like she genuinely wanted to learn. We built Southridge together, not with venture capital, but with caution and sweat. She was 35 then, ambitious but green about tech operations. I taught her everything, how packet loss could kill a business deal, why redundancy wasn't just nice to have, what it meant when servers started running hot. I remember 2012 when that ice storm hit Dallas and we lost our first stack to power grid failure. The generators failed in sub-freezing temperatures and our main servers were going down one by one. I was the one who drove through ice-covered roads at 2 a.m. with portable generators in my truck bed, keeping us online while half of Texas was without power. Took me 14 hours straight to get us back online using a jury-rigged setup in the conference room. That was the worst ice storm Texas had seen in decades. Power lines down across 3 counties, emergency services overwhelmed, businesses closed for a week. But Southridge stayed online because I'd planned for exactly this kind of infrastructure failure. Backup generators, redundant power feeds, emergency protocols nobody else thought we'd ever need. Helen brought me coffee and a sandwich at 4 a.m., her hands shaking from exhaustion and stress. "This place runs because of you," she said that night. "I don't know what we'd do without you." She called me her stormproof engineer for years after that. Even had it printed on a coffee mug she gave me the next Christmas. I still have that mug, but lately, all I heard was Ryan. Ryan, who pronounced SSL like it was some trendy restaurant chain. Ryan, who called my cable labeling system extra and old school. Ryan, who once unplugged a production server mid-sync because he thought the blinking lights meant it was broken. When I found out, he shrugged and said, "It looked busy. I thought it needed a break." I documented that incident, of course. Always document everything. Learned that in the Navy. Paper trail saves your career when someone above you makes bad decisions. The writing was on the wall long before they made it official. Helen started skipping our weekly system reviews. My equipment upgrade requests got delayed while the marketing budget ballooned to twice what we spent on infrastructure. She hired a director of digital experience whose job seemed to be making PowerPoint slides about synergy and cloud-first thinking. Then came the investor tours, full dog and pony shows where I wasn't invited, but I watched the security footage later, watched Helen lead them through the server room like she'd built everything herself, watched Ryan pointing at equipment and using words like optimize and streamline without understanding what any of it actually did. He called the server room his future playground in one presentation. I wrote that phrase down, dated it, filed it away. You never know when you'll need exact quotes later. During one tour, an investor asked about our disaster recovery protocols. Helen looked around like she was searching for me. Then Ryan jumped in with some nonsense about cloud-based solutions and automated failover systems. The investor nodded politely, but I could see his expression. He knew buzzword salad when he heard it. That night, I stayed late to run diagnostics on rack 7, which had been showing temperature spikes. While I worked, I pulled up the security footage of that investor meeting again. Watched Ryan gesture confidently at systems he'd never touched, never maintained, never understood. Watched Helen nod along like she hadn't spent years asking me to explain the difference between bandwidth and latency. I thought about all those Saturday mornings when Helen would call because something was beeping in the server room. All those times I walked her through basic troubleshooting over the phone. All those emergency calls when her solution was to restart everything and hope for the best. Now she was nodding along while her son explained our infrastructure to investors using terms he'd picked up from YouTube videos. Still, I stayed quiet. Some systems only crash when you hit the wrong button at the wrong time, and I wasn't ready to push any buttons yet. I had a feeling Ryan would do that himself soon enough. Then Helen approached me outside the main server bay on a Tuesday morning. "Got a minute?" she said, casual as asking about lunch. The lights above us flickered slightly, ballast issue I'd been meaning to fix. She glanced up with that worried look she got whenever anything electronic acted up, then back at me with an expression I'd learned to recognize over the years, the look that meant she was about to ask for something she knew I wouldn't like. "We're shifting things around," she started, hands clasped behind her back like she was giving a presentation. "Ryan's stepping up. Time for the next generation to take over." I waited, let the silence hang there until she filled it with more words. "You'll move into compliance reporting, lighter workload, less pressure. Let Ryan handle the architecture stuff. You've done your part." She said it like she was offering me a promotion instead of a demotion. Time to hand things off. Just like that, like 16 years of turning Southridge from a server closet into a regional powerhouse was just a warm-up act. "Ryan's got vision now," she added, the words sliding out like a sales pitch she'd practiced. "Fresh perspective. You've got the experience to help him succeed." Vision. The kid couldn't tell the difference between a checksum and a coffee order. Last week, I'd watched him break a cabinet latch trying to force it open without disengaging the security tabs. The week before that, he'd left his guest credentials stuck to the firewall cabinet on a bright yellow sticky note that said Ryan's password in block letters. But the real kicker was when he tried to impress some clients by showing them our cutting-edge server technology. He pointed to our oldest backup unit, a machine from 2015 that we kept for legacy compatibility, and called it our flagship quantum processing core. The clients nodded politely while I stood in the corner dying inside. "So you're benching me?" I said. Not asking, just stating facts. Helen gave that awkward laugh older people do when they know they're cutting you but want to pretend they're doing you a favor. "Come on, it's just the natural next phase. You've done your part. Ryan's got fresh ideas, new energy, and Ryan understands the control architecture." She waved a dismissive hand, already turning away like the conversation was over. "He's a smart kid, fast learner. Besides, you'll be training him." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a transition, it was a setup. Strip away my access, move me to paperwork, and when Ryan inevitably set something on fire, they'd point to me. Say I was the one who trained him, that I signed off on his decisions, that I should have seen it coming. The training process started the next day. Ryan showed up to our first session with a legal pad, like he was going to take notes on 16 years of infrastructure knowledge. He sat across from me at the conference table while I pulled up network diagrams on the big screen. "Okay," I said, pointing to our main router configuration. "This handles traffic routing for our entire Eastern Seaboard operation. See these redundancy pathways?" Ryan squinted at the screen. "Why are there so many lines? Seems complicated. Can't we just use one big connection?" I took a deep breath. If the primary connection fails, traffic automatically reroutes through these backup pathways. That's how we maintain 99.87% uptime. Right, but what if we just had really good internet? Then it wouldn't fail. I stared at him. This wasn't lack of experience. This was fundamental misunderstanding of how networks work. Like asking why cars need wheels when roads are so smooth. "Ryan, our clients depend on us for mission-critical infrastructure. One of our contracts is with Regional Medical Network. If their system goes down, people could die." He nodded like he got it, then asked, "But couldn't they just use their phones as backup?" That's when I knew this wasn't going to work. You can teach someone configuration commands, troubleshooting procedures, even complex network protocols, but you can't teach someone to understand what's at stake. Over the next week, I tried different approaches. Hands-on demonstrations where I showed him physical connections, simplified diagrams that broke down complex systems into basic components. I even created a step-by-step manual with screenshots and detailed explanations. Ryan absorbed none of it. During one session, while I explained database replication protocols, he interrupted to ask if I'd seen some YouTube video about a guy who built a gaming computer. When I tried to show him our disaster recovery procedures, he suggested we just back everything up to Google Drive. The breaking point came when he tried to help with a routine maintenance task. I was updating firmware on our core switches, delicate work that requires specific timing and sequencing. Ryan watched for about 10 minutes, then said he wanted to try. "This one looks the same as that one," he said, reaching for a production switch. "Can I update this one too?" I grabbed his hand before he could touch anything. "That's our primary customer-facing switch. It's handling live traffic for 200 client connections right now. So if you interrupt it improperly, you'll knock out service for every client on our Eastern network. We're talking millions of dollars in losses, breach of contract penalties, possible lawsuits." Ryan pulled his hand back, annoyed. "You don't have to be so dramatic about it. It's just computers. Just computers." That phrase echoed in my head for the rest of the day. This kid thought he was about to take over responsibility for infrastructure that supported hospitals, financial institutions, and emergency services, and he thought it was just computers. That night, Helen stopped by my workstation as I was finishing the firmware updates. "How's the training going?" she asked. I looked up at her. This woman I'd worked alongside for 16 years, who'd called me irreplaceable after every major crisis, who'd once told her husband I was like the son she never had. "It's going," I said. She must have heard something in my voice because her expression shifted. "Lucas, I know this transition isn't easy, but Ryan's really excited about taking on more responsibility. Give him a chance." A chance. Like I hadn't spent 3 weeks trying to teach basic network concepts to someone who thought Wi-Fi was the same as internet. Like I hadn't watched him nearly crash our entire customer network because he wanted to try stuff. "Sure," I said, "I'll give him a chance." But that night, I started making plans. That night, I sat at home with a bourbon and my personal documentation files. Not the sanitized stuff I handed to onboarding teams, the real guts. The kind of knowledge that only lives in the mind of someone who built something from scratch. Dependencies, escalation protocols, route configurations, every single tripwire I'd installed over 16 years. I opened a new file called Departure Protocol. No drama, no threats, just line-by-line instructions on what to disable, who to notify, where the silent safeguards were hidden. Every badge ID, every IP reservation, every backup circuit I'd built with my own hands. 6 years in the Navy teaches you to document everything twice. Once for the official record, once for when things go sideways and you need to prove what actually happened. I had records going back to day one. Every emergency call, every after-hours fix, every time someone above my pay grade made a decision that could have killed the network. Like the time in 2015 when Helen's assistant decided to clean up the server room and unplugged what she thought was an old computer. Turned out to be our backup domain controller. I had photos of the mess, time-stamped emails of my warnings about untrained personnel in critical areas, and recordings of the 3-hour phone call where I talked Helen through emergency recovery procedures from my kitchen table. At 2:17 a.m., I encrypted the departure file and stored it on a mirrored drive Ryan would never find. I also printed a hard copy. Sometimes you need paper in your hands to prove some things exist outside of corporate memory holes. I wasn't angry, just focused. When I came back the next morning, Ryan's desk still had plastic wrap on half his equipment. He showed up around 10 a.m. like he was arriving for a casual coffee meeting, not taking control of infrastructure worth more than the building it sat in. Starbucks in one hand, phone in the other, shoes that had never seen a server room floor. "You ready to show me the advanced stuff today?" he said with that grin, like yesterday's training session had gone well instead of ending with him nearly crashing our customer network. I didn't answer. I was already unplugging my terminal, packing my keyboard, monitor, encrypted drives, the backup security fob I kept hidden behind rack 7. Everything precise, everything final. I'd already wiped my personal credentials and rotated access protocols by the time he crossed the room. Clean, legal, documented. "No," I said, standing up and pushing my chair in. "I'm done here." He paused mid-sip, confused. "You're what? Done with what?" I pulled out a manila folder from my bag, heavy, intentional, printed in triplicate because I don't trust digital handoffs when the recipient still uses password 123 for everything. Set it gently on his desk. Full systems inventory, off-boarding instructions, vendor contacts, maintenance logs, expiry dates, backup procedures. Anything you don't understand in there you probably shouldn't touch. He stared at the folder like it might explode. Wait, what is this? Some kind of test? Behind him, Helen's voice echoed as she walked in from her morning meeting. What's going on here? She saw the powered-down terminal, the packed box, the empty chair where I'd sat for 16 years. Her face went through about 5 different expressions before landing on panic. Hold on, she said, stepping forward quickly. This isn't how we planned this transition. We talked about a gradual handoff. I turned to face her. The same woman who once told me I was the backbone of this company, who asked me to rebuild entire systems from flood damage with no budget and less sleep, who now wanted to hand the keys to someone who thought our core infrastructure was just computers. You made your choice, I said, looking her straight in the eye. She opened her mouth like she wanted to object, maybe bargain, maybe explain how this was all a misunderstanding. But no words came because there wasn't a single technical argument she could make to keep me there, and we both knew it. Behind her, Ryan was flipping through the folder, eyebrows scrunched together, lips moving silently as he tried to decode the difference between VLAN and VPN. I'd written both terms in the same paragraph on page 1. He was already lost. Lucas, please, Helen said, her voice taking on that tone she used during actual emergencies. Let's talk about this in my office. We can work something out. Like what? A different title for the same demotion? A corner office for my compliance paperwork? That's not fair. Ryan needs someone with experience to guide him. Ryan needs about 2 years of training before he should be allowed near production equipment. You want to give him the keys tomorrow. Helen's face flushed red. He's my son. I know he can do this. Then he can do it without me. I walked past them both without another word. Past the racks I'd rebuilt screw by screw. Past the cold aisle where I'd patched emergency connections during ice storms. Past the cabinet where I used to keep energy bars for the junior techs who worked late. At the door, I paused for one last look. Not out of sentiment, but for documentation. I wanted to remember the exact moment they realized what they'd just lost. Ryan had given up on the folder and was pulling out his phone, probably to Google what half the terms meant. Helen stood frozen, staring at my empty workstation like she was trying to calculate how much knowledge had just walked out the door. Neither of them said anything as I left. They didn't know what to say. In the lobby, I handed my badge to Jordan at reception. She looked confused, glancing between the badge and my face. Is this some kind of system maintenance thing? She asked. You usually just disable badges remotely. I smiled. Something like that. I stepped out into the hot Texas pavement, the familiar weight of my security badge gone from my belt for the first time in 16 years. My phone buzzed once, an automated email confirming my departure ticket had been processed successfully. All credentials voided. Clean handoff, end of file. I didn't look back, just walked to my truck and drove away with 16 years of knowledge they could no longer afford to pretend was replaceable. The first call came 2 hours later. The first call came at 11:42 a.m. Southridge Legal. I watched it ring while stirring cream into my coffee at a diner 2 exits down from the office. Didn't decline it. I wanted a timestamp, a record. Their panic had officially begun. By noon, they'd tried twice more. Voicemail from some junior associate, voice cracking. We'd just like to clarify some language in your contract regarding post-termination obligations. Clarify. That was their first mistake. See, back in 2012, after I personally recovered the ice storm systems and rebuilt the core infrastructure on coffee and determination, Helen sat across from me in our temporary trailer headquarters. Power grid failures had forced us to relocate operations for 6 weeks. You've earned permanence here, she said, sliding a contract revision across the folding table. Real security, not just a handshake deal. We redrafted my employment agreement quietly, no HR circus, just legal and a private signing. Most of it was standard stuff, but buried on page 17 was clause 8.3c. One line that seemed insignificant at the time. Voluntary termination following role reclassification without technical equivalent assignment activates equity dissolution trigger with full acceleration of deferred compensation. At the time, my deferred compensation was maybe $200K. Token money, a good faith gesture. But over 16 years, with equity grants and performance bonuses stacking up, it had grown into something substantial. $4.2 million spread across accelerated stock options, milestone bonuses, and contractual severance due within 30 days. Not negotiable, not discretionary, just active. At 10:30 p.m., Ryan sent a company-wide Slack message. Excited to take the reins and keep our momentum going. Grateful for everything our legacy team has built. Legacy. That's what you call someone's work when you don't understand how it functions. I heard through Oliver Stone, our former cybersecurity consultant, that Ryan had asked if they could pause the clause like it was a Netflix subscription. Oliver quit the next day, texting me. Kid asked me to help him understand your old config notes. I told him to hire someone who actually knows networking. Then I sent my final invoice. By 3 p.m., a message from Helen landed in my inbox. Can we discuss your departure terms privately? I didn't open it. Instead, I forwarded a copy of the signed 2012 contract amendment to my lawyer, Ashley Pierce, with a short note. Clause 8.3c is now active. Please prepare formal demand. She called back 6 minutes later. This is airtight. Their counsel is going to hate this. But the money wasn't even the real problem. The real problem started when vendor management opened my departure memo and found 3 words buried in the technical specifications. Key personnel trigger. Back in 2016, when Southridge was growing fast and Helen was signing contracts without reading fine print, I'd worked with legal to secure our service-level agreements with 3 major telecom clients. Standard procedure, after an executive nearly killed our uptime with budget cuts. Those SLAs weren't just boilerplate. They had specific riders. Certain personnel, me specifically, had to remain active in operations oversight, or the contracts would default to 90-day renegotiation periods. No me, no service guarantee. No me, no locked-in rates. No me, no contract. I'd warned Helen when we drafted them. If you want me invisible, don't make me irreplaceable. She laughed, signed anyway, probably forgot about it 5 minutes later. Now Ryan was learning what I'd tried to teach Helen years ago. Infrastructure isn't just about equipment. It's about trust, relationships, and the people who've proven they can keep critical systems running when everything goes wrong. Client number 1, Regional Telecom of West Texas, sent a notice within 48 hours. Please confirm that Mr. Rodriguez will continue overseeing infrastructure compliance per section 4.2 of our service agreement. If not, we're exercising our right to immediate contract review. Client number 2, Arcline Communications, didn't even bother with formalities. Just wrote, if Lucas is gone, our SLA is void. We'll be soliciting new bids. Client number 3 picked up the phone and called Stratacore Network Solutions directly. That's where I'd landed 72 hours after walking out of Southridge. Stratacore's office felt like stepping back in time to when tech companies were actually about technology. No beanbags or ping-pong tables, just engineers who carried real tools and whiteboards covered with actual network diagrams instead of marketing buzzwords. Day 1, they handed me a badge reading Lucas Rodriguez, Director of Infrastructure Strategy. No ceremony, no corporate culture presentation. Just a handshake, a security clearance, and the freedom to build systems the right way. On my second day, the CEO stopped by my desk with coffee. Any preferences for server naming conventions? Want your initials in the routing protocols? I nodded, not because I needed the recognition, but because someone finally understood what it meant to respect the person actually doing the work. Meanwhile, Southridge was falling apart in slow motion. Helen tried reaching out through her personal email. Hope you're settling in well at your new position. We're hoping you might consider short-term consulting to help with the transition. Ashley Pierce handled it with 2 sentences. All communication must go through legal counsel. Compensation terms outlined in formal demand remain unchanged. They'd run the numbers by then. Stock acceleration, legal fees, client contract penalties, arbitration costs if they tried to fight it. That quarter, Southridge issued an internal memo. Temporary suspension of executive compensation pending resolution of strategic financial obligations. Corporate speak for we had to cancel management bonuses to pay the guy we threw out. 3 weeks into my new job, someone forwarded me a screenshot from Southridge's internal ticketing system. Former director's system access creating authentication conflicts. Urgent remediation required. I looked at it and felt good about how things worked out. They'd finally figured out I hadn't just worked their infrastructure, I was their infrastructure. Every system carried traces of my work, configurations that assumed I'd be there to maintain them, safeguards that only made sense if you understood the logic behind them. Word travels fast in the tech world, not through press releases or LinkedIn posts, but through Friday afternoon calls where someone asks, "Know anybody solid for infrastructure work?" and gets back, "Yeah, Lucas Rodriguez. He's at Stratacore now." I didn't gloat, didn't need to. Just built better systems with people who understood the difference between leadership and management, between vision and competence. 6 months later, I drive past the Southridge building sometimes. Still see the lights blinking on their tower, systems still running on. Infrastructure I designed years ago. The fiber doesn't lie about who built it, and every time a signal moves through cables I installed, switches I configured, protocols I designed, it carries one simple truth: he built this. That's all that matters now.